Going back to the beginning. Hi, I'm Louise Fouché from OTGrow. Welcome to our YouTube channel. Here we discuss tools, tips, and techniques to make you an effective group facilitator. But today I want to share something else. I have been reading Dr. Irvin Yalom's Becoming Myself, which is a psychiatrist's memoir, and it basically traces his own history, biography. And so it's fascinating for me to read parts of his own development and his own thinking that kind of developed around groups. And I wanted to share one or two things that has stood out for me as I'm reading this book. I haven't finished it yet, but I wanted to share one or two things. All right, so I'm reading here from page 101. And it says Frank Jerome's group therapy model fit neatly into the interpersonal approach, an American psychodynamic theory. The interpersonal approach was a modification of the older orthodox Freudian position. So it's important to remember here, we've got so many approaches now, the Rogerian approach, humanistic, CBT, DBT, existential. But in those years when Dr. Yalom was still in his residency, there was very few options available apart from this interpersonal theory that he talks about and the Freudian or the psychoanalytical approach. All right, I'm continuing. It stressed the importance of the interpersonal relations in the individual's development throughout his life cycle, whereas the older approach, which was the Freudian approach, placed most of its emphasis on the very early years of life. And then he goes on to say that he had a look at Harry Sullivan's work, and I'll quickly visit that in a moment, but I want to finish reading here. In general, Harry Sullivan's work helped me understand that most of our patients fall into despair because of their inability to establish and maintain nurturing interpersonal relationships. And to my mind, it followed that group therapy provided the ideal arena in which to explore and to change maladaptive modes of relating to others. I was fascinated by the group process and throughout my residency led many groups in both inpatient and outpatient settings. And then he briefly goes on to say that he then really longed to find some comprehensive explanatory system for this experience that he was doing. And forward a couple of years, we then come to this theory and practice of the group psychotherapy. And so it's just so fascinating to see what were the things that really stood out for him, not only in terms of his experience, but what he was exposed to. I think the other thing we can just briefly focus on is also with Harry Sullivan, how this idea of where we've often thought people with mental health disorders or diagnosis, that is the problem and that impacts interpersonal relationships. Maybe that's not true for you, but a lot of people out there think that way. Whereas Harry Sullivan then starts by saying, no, we're looking at because of poor ability to establish and maintain nurturing interpersonal relationships. So that almost becomes first. Then, as a result of that, we then find people starting to develop mental illnesses and diagnosis and disorders. So maybe the question for us here is, do we also believe that ourselves? And then understanding that in our groups, we can see almost like in a magnifying glass in this microcosm how people do have maladaptive ways of relating to each other and how those can be changed in the interactive group model. I quickly want to just circle back to Harry Sullivan. And so it's actually Harry Stack Sullivan, and it's his theory is the interpersonal theory of psychiatry. And remember, this was way back when, and he states that personality develops through social interaction and relationships rather than innate drives. And again, I'm so aware of why the interpersonal theory is so valuable when we are dealing with people with personality disorders, and how people that struggle with personality disorders or have diagnosis with personality disorders, the intervention of choice is group therapy. And so we can see all these dots being joined. Also, Harry Sullivan goes on to say he emphasizes how individuals' social and cultural environment shapes their inner life, and that mental health problems often stem from failed interpersonal relationships. All right, so I just found that really exciting. The other bit I want to quickly highlight that came out of the book, and I just want to draw your attention to it. Those of us that are occupational therapists might not be aware that the psychiatrist Adolf Meyer played a very big role in starting occupational therapy in America. And I'd like to acknowledge Michael Fouché for bringing this under my attention. So he was fundamental. He really was pro activities and pro a holistic approach to psychiatric clients. And he spoke about his biopsychological approach. And what is also really interesting, and again, joining all the dots, is that in his memoir, Dr. Yalom also emphasizes his admiration and respect for Adolf Meyer and his biopsychological approach that he leaned into. So I thought I would bring this way back from the start. Where is the actual roots, and then bringing it forward into Yalom's theory and practice of group psychotherapy, and which the interactive group model is then built on top of that foundation. And I think from all of this, it's a reminder in this coming week that interpersonal relationships, we are wired social beings where our interpersonal relationships is really what helps to keep us healthy, and how our clients struggle with that. So in the meantime, happy facilitation.